I'm Veronica Wilson, and I'm doing my speech on the correlation between video games and real-life violence. Here is my audience, just a few friends of mine. There's two, and third person. Alright. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to be asking you guys a couple questions throughout this, not to have you answer it, but just to think about. So, have you ever thought about if video games cause people to become more violent in real life? Depends on who you are. Depends on how much you follow the news. Alright, so I decided to separate into two demographic research parts. Demographics that play video games, demographics that have the highest reports of violence, and then correlation between them. So, start off with, these are the demographics that play video games the most. Most gamers are between the ages of 18 and 35. Men are 3 times as likely to play video games as women. However, in 2018, women were up to 45%, which is very high. And right here I have a graph that shows how likely young people and men and women, some different education levels and different races, decided whether they would often play video games or they would sometimes play video games. And as you can see, men are higher, ages 18 and 29 are way up, and then of course there's a good number of people who are over 65 and play. Okay, next question, do you feel that these statistics are representative of you guys? Of course, since we're all young 20-somethings, it should. Okay, next is the demographic with the highest reported rates of violence. It said that in 2019 it was shown that the most people who have been arrested this year are under the age of 30 years old. It says that men are shown to be victimized more in violent crimes, while women are more likely to be victimized in sexual crimes. And then, according to a study done by the U.S. Department of Justice, it said that people who are rated in the poor category of income level or under $15,000 a year were more likely to be victimized in crimes. And then this is a figure from the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics that did a study on crimes and what the victims' yearly income was. And as you can see, the poor bracket is a lot bigger. Okay, and now that we've looked at the demographics, let's look at the stuff that I looked at to see if video games did cause real-life violence. So, evidence for correlation. So obviously, as it was stated, people in 2019, a lot of them were under the age of 30 that got arrested more, and then of course a lot of reported crimes committed were by people under the age of 30, and then a lot of people who play video games are around the age of 30. A little bit of evidence for there not being a correlation is that I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name, not going to try, but in the article that they created, they stated that in the study that they did on teenagers, that they found that the teenagers who played more video games were not shown to be any more or less aggressive than teenagers who didn't play video games. So now I have a video to show you guys. It's by a guy I follow on YouTube. His name is Matthew Patrick. He's in charge of a show called The Game Theorist. He actually did a video on if video games cause real-life violence. So I have about a 2-minute clip for you guys to watch. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so the clip I'm going to have you watch is right about here.
Let's start with angle number 1, shall we? Looking at any links between video games and crime. To start off with, we have to talk a little bit about the history of some of the more controversial and violent video games. You see, if there is indeed a direct causal link between violence shown in video games and users becoming more violent in their daily lives, then we would expect to see increases in violence spurred on by some of the most popular violent video games in history. And While there are definitely some very early video games that have violent themes to them, if we want to talk about true graphic or realistic violence becoming popular in the mainstream, well, we'd probably have to look here. The early 90s and Mortal Kombat, which was released in 1992, as well as Wolfenstein 3D and Doom in 1992 and 1993. From that point forward, we've seen plenty of other violent video games get themselves bad press, like the Grand Theft Auto series, the Call of Duty series, Battlefield, things like that. But for the most part, the availability of violent video games has been pretty constant since the mid-90s. Now, this graph that you see right behind me shows us the growth of gaming, both in terms of pure number of games sold per year, as well as the number of titles released per year. And unsurprisingly, they both start to take off here in the mid-90s, with platforms like the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 really surging to popularity, and then it explodes in the 2000s as they really hit their peak, and it's all started to taper off, coming back down here in the mid-2010s as smartphones and mobile gaming have become more popular. But it's pretty clear that if the real surge in video games, which would include violent video games, occurs between the mid-90s and 2010, well, if they're influencing people to commit more violence in real life, then crime statistics should show similar growth during those same periods. But when you look at the data, that's the opposite of what's happened. The murder rate in the United States actually hits its peak in 1980. Pac-Man fever truly setting people's minds into the rage mode. But starting in the early 90s, those rates went way down. From 1991 through 2016, homicides in the U.S. have actually gone down by 45.5%. And it's not just homicide that we're talking about here. We're talking about all major crime categories across the board. Assault, burglary, rape, all of them are down by at least 30% since 1991. The idea that the popularity of video games, which again weren't really all that commonly played until about the 1990s, has contributed to making the United States a more violent society as a whole just doesn't really show up in these sorts of statistics. Now,
Okay, so that was part of his discussion on how video games cause or do not cause violence. He does state later in his video that because everyone's different, everybody's obviously going to react differently. So even though you could have a classroom of 20 kids who all play a violent video game, while maybe like 18 of those kids are like, oh, well, this is a really cool game, that's fine, and they go about their day, the other two might think, oh my gosh, I could totally do this. Like, they could totally do that in real life. And he also states that 4 out of the 18 mass shootings that have happened in the past 20 years, only those 4 incidents did the shooter say, hey, video games influenced my life really well. And he actually states one specific one in Norway where the kid said that him playing Call of Duty helped him to aim better and helped him to figure out like target systems. So, hope you guys are now a little bit informed about the possible correlation. It would be great if you guys could take about 20 minutes just to watch the full video that Matthew Patrick did. It's titled, Do Video Games Cause Violence? It's Complicated. He did a lot of research on the topic and used many resources to back up his information and conclusions. He used a lot of stuff to back up whether or not there's a correlation or whether there's not a correlation. And here's all my resources. As you can see, there is a lot because there's been a lot done on it. And that is the end of my presentation. And here are my audience members again. And that's it.